Fantastic. All right. So, as I was saying, I'm going to share my career journey from Rio de Janeiro in Brazil to NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, where today I am chief scientist for planetary science. And I want to tell the girls out there, it doesn't matter what your background is. There had never been a scientist in my family. Neither of my parents had degrees. I just decided that this is what I was going to do, and I did it. So there I was, growing up in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, by Ipanema Beach. And since I was very little, like in first grade is the picture in the middle, I was fascinated by space. I had heard of Yuri Gagarin, this Russian going up in space, and I really wanted to become an astronaut and go to the moon. But I had a problem because I was Brazilian, and at that time there weren't any Brazilian astronauts. I was a girl, and except for one, all the astronauts were men, and I had terrible eyesight. So I decided instead to study astronomy and become a scientist and work for NASA. And I was greatly inspired by this lady called Frances Northcutt. Her nickname is Poppy. I was about 12 years old when I saw this picture in the newspaper. And back in those days, there weren't any women working on mission control. And when I saw Poppy there, it was a great thing. I decided, well, there is a woman there, I can do it too. So I think that festivals like these ones are really important because, it shows people out there that women can do anything. And in fact, many years later, only a couple of years ago, I finally met Poppy. And here we are at the JPL. She actually left NASA eventually and became an attorney. So she really changed careers. So I went to college in London, University College London, did my PhD there as well. I started going to volcanoes because my advisor was a volcanologist. I was studying planetary geology. And he said, if you don't understand volcanoes on Earth, you can't understand volcanoes on other planets. I also, when I was finishing my PhD, I had a job at the Greenwich Observatory, the famous Greenwich Observatory, or the Old Royal Observatory, and I was responsible for observations with the big telescope. You don't see in the picture how big, but it's a 28-inch refractor. But I decided to do a postdoc at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, which is administered by Caltech, the California Institute of Technology. And on the upper left there is a picture of our lab. We have about 7,000 people only. At the moment, most of us are working from home. And we have sent spacecraft all over the solar system. And I joined a mission called Galileo that was going to Jupiter. And it was going to make observations of this moon, is Jupiter's moon Io, not 10, not low, but Io. And this is an image from the Galileo spacecraft. It's also known as the pizza moon because it looks like a pizza. It's about the size of our own moon, but it has lots of volcanoes, and the yellows and reds you see on the surface are all products of sulfur. So, you probably have seen sulfur in labs, and sulfur can take many colors, but yellow and greens and reds, some of them. But I really worked with the infrared instrument. So on the left, you see a picture of Io in the visible. And on the right, a picture in the infrared taken by the instrument I was working with. And the active volcanoes have heat, so they really, pop up in the infrared. And with those observations, I ended up discovering 71 volcanoes that no one knew were active. And I even got in the Guinness Book of World Records of having discovered more active volcanoes than anybody ever. Here's one of my favorites. It's a volcano called Tupan. It's about 70 kilometers across and is actually a lava lake. You can see the dark, all the parts that are dark are hot. And it has an island in the middle that's a bit of a mystery why that island is there. But after the Galileo mission ended, I went to work on the Cassini mission. And the Cassini spacecraft went to Saturn, and I started studying Saturn's moon Titan, which has a very dense atmosphere. Here is a picture taken by the camera, and you can't really see anything sharp because there is all this atmosphere and haze that covers the surface. But I was working with the radar instrument, and when we flew by Titan with the spacecraft, we would get these observations with the radar using synthetic aperture radar mode, which really gives us pictures and in some cases also topography. And as we filled in more and more, we got very interested in the North Polar region because here is a composite of all these noodles, and it's false color, but everything that's dark here is actually liquid. So these are lakes and seas, only they are not lakes and seas of water, because Titan is so cold that water is ice like rock hard. And the lakes and seas on Titan, on the surface, are actually made of methane. So methane on Earth is a gas, but on Titan is so cold that methane can exist as a liquid. And what I was really interested in were the possible volcanoes on Titan. And here we got some topography. The colors are artificial too, only to show differences in composition. And we found several volcanoes or features that we think are volcanoes. This one, it was named Doom Mons after Mount Doom of Lord of the Rings. And it's about 1 kilometer high, and it has a very deep pit or crater about 1 kilometer deep. But these are not volcanoes made of molten rock like on Earth. And here's a diagram of Titan. And so Titan has a surface where a lot of organic materials fall from the atmosphere, and then it has a layer of ice. But underneath, it has an ocean of liquid water. And that's very interesting because if you have organics and if you have water, you could actually have life, biological activity in the ocean. And if you have volcanism, but ice volcanism in which this water can come back up on the surface, then you have a chance of eventually detecting what we call biosignatures. Things that could only be made by microbes or bacteria on the surface. So that's my current project. But I have been very fortunate having many adventures around the world. Here is a lava lake similar to the ones we have on Io, but is on Umbrium Island, is in the Vanuatu group in the South Pacific. And I also went to Erebus in Antarctica, the only active volcano in Antarctica. Here are some ice towers, very beautiful things on Erebus. And here is in Ethiopia with a couple of colleagues, a geothermal region that again has lots of sulfur like Io. But I'm going to leave you, I had to be quick because we don't have much time, with a picture of Saturn taken by the Cassini mission. Saturn has all these rings made up of ice particles, and here they are being illuminated by sunlight behind the planet. And I think is one of the most beautiful space pictures ever taken. If you look very, very closely, and I'm going to help you, you can see a pale blue dot, and that's Earth. And in the words of Carl Sagan, he said, look again at that dot. That's here, that's home, that's us. Every saint and sinner in the history of our species lived there on a mote of dust suspended in a sunbeam. So that gives you kind of some perspective of really where we are in the universe. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing, and maybe we'll have time for a few questions.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Rosaly. That was an amazing presentation. Thank you for making that work, and sorry for the trouble at the beginning.
No, that's all right.
I'm so glad you ended with pale blue dots. So few people reference it. It's the most iconic and amazing space image and story ever. And when people are done this session today, when it's 5 o'clock, we're done for the day, head to YouTube, listen to the whole pale blue dot speech. It's one of the most beautiful things in the history of science. So for all our folks tuning in on YouTube and on Facebook, groups all over the world, if you guys want to share questions in the chat bar, please do. We'll take as many as we can over the next 10 minutes or so. But I want to start with, I mean, is there a place that you haven't been that you'd love to go? There's volcanoes all over the world. There's all these amazing places. Is there a place that really jumps out, or maybe one that you were going to head to this year and couldn't because of the pandemic? Or
yes, well, actually, I'm particularly keen on going to lava lakes. Yeah. And that is because many volcanoes on Io have lava lakes. So I have visited many lava lakes. Well, not many. We only have about half a dozen lava lakes on Earth. So I went to Ethiopia to one, and Hawaii, and Erebus in Antarctica has one. But where I'd really like to go next is the lava lake on a volcano called Nyiragongo in the Congo. Yeah. Unfortunately, the Congo is a very hard place to travel in. They not only the pandemic, but they have Ebola, they have civil unrest. So I've been waiting until things get better to travel to the Congo. But closer to home, I'd love to go back to Hawaii. My colleagues and I have done a lot of work on the Big Island of Hawaii. Yeah. So that would be really good to go back to that.
Well, I certainly hope you get the chance soon. I think Hawaii is probably the most accessible lava lake in the world, with a lot of millions of visitors every year, which is really exciting. But Nyiragongo, we've heard about this from some of our past speakers. It's a very rare treat to get to visit, and I hope you get that opportunity in the years to come.
Thank you.
Fallon wants to know on YouTube, how long does it take for a volcano to erupt?
Well, some volcanoes erupt all the time. Yeah. In fact, lava lakes are active all the time, sometimes for dozens of years, and some volcanoes have been active for maybe 2,000 years. We have some volcanoes that have what we call open systems, like open to the magma chamber, and they're erupting all the time. And other volcanoes, depending on the type, they might erupt once every few years, or some, every hundreds of years or even longer. So it really depends on the volcano. Volcanoes are not all the same. There are different types. We can roughly classify them in, but they're also very individual.
Yeah. You talked about going to Ethiopia, and just as a question of my own, it's one of the most amazing places in the world where the Earth's sort of ripping itself apart.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
So can you explain what it's like going to see the Ethiopian volcanoes in that sort of area? Because it's a very unique spot in the world, and I'd love to highlight that for our audience today.
Oh, yes. Ita Ali is the name of the volcano and the lava lake. It is one of the most fabulous places in the world. And I showed a quick picture of the geothermal region, all yellow. That's called the Dalol region, and it's near Ita Ali. In Ethiopia, and that's one of the most beautiful places I have ever been. The lava lake in Ethiopia is great because you can get right to the edge of it. In places like Hawaii, there are a lot of restrictions, even for researchers, by the national parks and by the state of Hawaii. But in Ethiopia, the region is actually a very tribal region, so you actually negotiate with the tribes to actually let you in and go there, and you can get right up to the edge. You can make beautiful measurements of the lava lake. So and being on the edge of that lava lake was the lava lake's about 100-meter or 300 feet across.
Yeah.
And that was like being on the edge of hell. And sometimes you had to step back because of the heat.
I've heard this before, that Ertali is like the closest, in people's minds, if you were to think of like a hellscape, Ertali is like the closest thing to that. I think that I'm really glad there's a place in the world where people like you have the opportunity to walk right up to the edge of a lava lake, but I think it's probably for the best that most people are kept a little bit away. Experience is an important aspect of that, but very, very cool. So, volcanoes, I mean, when people think about volcanoes, maybe their mind goes to Pompeii, Herculaneum, vast kinds of destruction. Is there a volcano on this planet that's very dangerous, that hasn't blown, that could blow, that people could be worried about or know a little bit more about?
Oh, yes. I mean, several of them. In the United States, the volcano that's considered the most hazardous is Mount Rainier in Washington State. And the reason is because Mount Rainier has glaciers at the top. And so it's not so much a matter of the the volcanic products, let's say the ash blowing up. Is the heat from that volcano, from the eruption, could actually melt glaciers, and then that material would come down in what's called mud flows. Yeah. And there are towns and people living in areas that are very hazardous, because that mud flow could reach those areas. So that's why volcanologists are particularly worried about Mount Rainier.
Yeah, but these are areas that are under a lot of constant scrutiny and study, like we're monitoring.
Yeah.
Yes, there's warnings in place. Certainly in the United States, we see this with other big natural disasters. People would warn the public if there was any threat of serious danger.
Yes, it's volcanoes don't just blow up in the middle of the night. They, at least not usually. They give you warning. Yeah. If you have instruments monitoring the volcano, you're going to have warning. So it's just in places where there is no instrumentation, more remote places, then you might be caught off guard. But in the United States, they're all very well monitored.
I think we can all sleep soundly knowing that. So thank you, Rosaly. That's great. We're going to take a few more questions from YouTube. We've got one from Alex. Alex wants to know, how many volcanoes are on this planet? You talked about lava lakes, but entirely volcanoes. Is there a number that we have for that?
Well, volcanoes on land are about, we have about 600 volcanoes that are considered active. But bear in mind that most of the volcanoes on Earth are under the oceans. So we have places like the Mid-Atlantic Ridge, where the Earth's plates are spreading apart, and lava is coming up. And it doesn't always reach the surface. Oh, sorry, the cat loves meetings.
The cat's the best. We love cats here. Don't worry.
Yes. So we have a lot more volcanoes under the ocean. And sometimes they reach the surface. So, for example, Iceland is an example of a whole island with numerous volcanoes that is on the Mid-Atlantic Ridge.
Yeah, it's such a cool thing to think that there's this entire submerged volcanic mountain range that we can explore and see. And I mean, there's so many, so much incredible footage now on YouTube of some of the deep down to those places. I mean, is there a chance you'll get in your life to go down in one of those submersibles and see an underwater?
Oh,
it's pretty hard. Yeah,
I would absolutely love to, but I haven't had a chance so far. Yeah. Fingers crossed. It will happen, and I'd love to go into space too.
We're gonna make it all happen for you. That's pretty exciting. We were talking yesterday about commercial space flight and more opportunities for people to be astronauts. So maybe one day we'll see how it goes.
Right.
So Cameron wants to know, have you ever personally been in any scary volcanic eruptions or run-ins in your career?
Oh, yes. In fact, I was trained by my advisor, who was a volcanologist and very experienced. And we did field work on Mount Etna in Sicily. And in my second time there, Mount Etna erupted, and it was a beautiful eruption. But then there was another one that was I said volcanoes don't usually erupt without warning, but it had a sudden explosion. It was not an eruption. And I was about a mile away, and unfortunately, some people died in that eruption.
Oh.
And a couple of years later, I was around that same crater that had exploded, and it exploded again without any apparent warning. But I did what I was trained to do, is that you don't run. You actually look up at what we call bombs, which are the pieces of lava coming up. And then if they're coming towards you, you run to the side. You step aside. You don't run blindly downhill. And there was another occasion again that a volcanic vent that we thought had stopped erupting hadn't. It gave one last gasp, and I was within reach of the bombs. So yes, I did some scary situations, but I was trained to know what to do.
Yeah, but that's got to be one of the most, unexpected pieces of advice ever. If a volcano's going off and blasting things in the sky, don't run away. Just stand there and watch and try and beat them at the last moment of impact. That is wild. Maybe avoid that one volcano if every time you go back it explodes. That's not.
Yeah, and there is another factor. Some volcanoes are very, very dangerous, like Mons and Helens. Most of the Cascade volcanoes, they can be very explosive. And you don't want to be anywhere near those if it looks like they might erupt. Volcanoes like Mount Etna or Kilauea in Hawaii, they'll have small explosions, and the explosions are really the dangerous part. You can step aside from bombs, but if there is a flow of hot gas and ash, what we call a pyroclastic flow, then you can't get away from those.
That's sort of what happened in Pompeii and Herculaneum.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
Frozen in place. Yeah. I just want to ask one more question. You mentioned Hawaii and Kilauea, and Hawaii is a really interesting example for people that are getting into volcanoes for the first time, because to my knowledge, it's where the plate is moving over a hot spot. So the island. Yeah. So could you explain a little bit about what that process is like?
Yes, Hawaii is what we call hotspot volcanism. And what happens that there is a place in the Earth's crust, some kind of weakness where the magma is coming up, but the plate is moving across that hot spot. So what happens that you have one volcano, and then the plate carries on moving, and then another volcano erupts somewhere else. So you can go down the island chain of Hawaii, and you can see that Kauai's volcanoes are the old, very old. And then Oahu, where Honolulu is, doesn't have any active volcanoes anymore, but Maui still has one that could possibly become active again. And then the Big Island is where the volcanoes are active. At least, three of them are. One is very active now, and two could still erupt. And there is a new volcano actually coming up from under the sea called Loihi, but it's going to take a long time to actually make an island.
Okay, so unlike space and Uragongo and the Deep Sea Ridge, don't wait for that one. Maybe just
no, it's it's not. If you buy real estate, there is a very long-term investment.
All right, well, we won't encourage that for any of our audience, but that was a very, very cool tour of volcanoes around the world in the universe. Rosaly, thank you so much for joining us. And again, sorry for the trouble at the beginning, but we really
sorry. All right, it's a pleasure being here.
Pleasure having you. Thank you so much. And we'll let you go for now. Keep on going with our Ruin Blaze Trails Fest and have a wonderful rest of your day. See you around.
Bye.